After the quake, a sudden hailstorm strikes Japan. In the hours following the tremors that rocked central Japan, the atmosphere shifted with an eerie sense of unpredictability. Streets cracked open, buildings stood swaying, some reduced to splinters of wood and steel. The earth, which had just roared beneath the feet of residents, seemed to fall silent, but the skies had other plans. Without warning, a cold wind began sweeping across the devastated towns. The temperature dropped drastically, a sharp contrast to the midsummer warmth that had blanketed the region earlier that morning. Survivors, still gathering their thoughts and belongings, looked up with confusion as dark clouds gathered with unnatural speed. Then came the sound, soft at first, like tiny pebbles against glass. A moment later, the storm arrived. Hailstones began falling from the sky in staggering numbers. At first, they were small, harmless pellets that bounced off rooftops and asphalt, but within minutes, they grew in size and intensity. The sky pelted the land with ice balls as large as golf balls, each one striking with alarming force. Windows shattered, windshields cracked. Makeshift shelters, hastily assembled in parking lots and open fields after the quake, buckled under the weight of accumulating ice. For those who had taken refuge outdoors, the hailstorm was a second disaster. People scrambled for protection under overpasses, inside vehicles, beneath tarps. Some covered their heads with backpacks or plastic tubs, shielding children with their bodies. The sudden onset of the storm left little time for organized response. Emergency personnel, already strained by earthquake rescue operations, now found themselves responding to injuries from hail strikes, bloody gashes, bruises, concussions. The streets, already clogged with debris and rubble from collapsed homes and buckled roads, became even more treacherous. Ice blanketed surfaces, turning them slick and unstable. Rescue vehicles moved cautiously through narrow, damaged corridors, their flashing lights barely visible through the thick curtain of hail. The sound of ice hitting metal filled the air, loud and relentless. In small towns near the epicenter, power lines that had survived the quake now gave way under the weight of frozen accumulation. Electrical sparks flickered and died as transformers blew. Entire neighborhoods plunged into darkness. The emergency sirens, once steady and strong, began to waver and fall silent. Communication lines failed intermittently, cutting off radio and mobile networks. Residents who had managed to contact family earlier now found their devices useless. Despite the chaos, communities did not collapse. Volunteers emerged with blankets, mats, and supplies, guiding the injured to safer areas. Schools and temples opened their doors to anyone in need, quickly transforming into temporary shelters. Inside, children clutched their parents tightly as the drumming sound of hail echoed through the walls. Lanterns and flashlights created pockets of warmth in otherwise dark spaces. In the countryside, farmers watched helplessly as their fields suffered. Crops already strained by the quake's tremors were now crushed under layers of ice. Trees bent under the weight, some splitting in half. Livestock ran for shelter, many injured by falling ice. The economic toll began to mount before the first day even ended. Meteorologists later described the phenomenon as an unusual convergence of conditions triggered by the earthquake's atmospheric disturbance. Moisture-laden air, pulled from nearby coasts, clashed with sudden shifts in air pressure caused by tectonic movement. The result was an explosive supercell, localized yet intense, dropping ice across a wide swath of land. In coastal regions, the situation was no less dire. The earthquake had triggered small landslides and aftershocks, weakening hillsides. When the hailstorm hit, it exacerbated conditions. Ice and rain combined, soaking loose soil, triggering further mud flows. In some areas, entire sections of hillside collapsed, cutting off roads and burying homes. The search for survivors became more desperate. By nightfall, the storm finally moved eastward, leaving behind a land reshaped by back-to-back disasters. Streets shimmered with broken glass and puddles of meltwater. Cars sat frozen, dented, immobile. Rooftops were perforated with holes. The injured crowded into overwhelmed hospitals and makeshift clinics. Exhausted rescue workers moved from zone to zone, dragging their feet through slush and ice. Yet, even amidst the devastation, moments of resilience emerged. In a northern town, a group of teenagers used sleds and carts to transport food from a damaged supermarket to a shelter. In another district, a retired nurse gathered children to distract them with stories and songs while parents searched for missing loved ones. In the absence of electricity, communities lit candles, shared meals, and took turns patrolling neighborhoods to check on the elderly and the sick. The following morning, the skies cleared. A pale sun rose over a battered landscape, casting long shadows over hail-covered fields and rubble-strewn streets. Melting ice dripped from tree branches, rooftops, and signs, the rhythmic sound of thaw signaling the end of the night's fury. Rescue helicopters hovered above, scanning the ground for heat signatures, while drones began mapping the scope of destruction. Government officials already en route to assess earthquake damage now faced a dual crisis. Relief shipments were doubled. Thermal blankets, first aid kits, and temporary heating units were prioritized. International support began to mobilize. Offers of aid and rescue teams poured in from abroad, many arriving within 24 hours of the quake. Over the next week, cleanup efforts intensified. Debris was cleared, power lines restored, and survivors relocated to safer zones. Engineers inspected buildings for structural integrity. Shelters swelled with displaced families. Officials worked around the clock to coordinate logistics, restore utilities, and rebuild communication. Though the double disaster shocked the nation, it also ignited a wave of unity. Volunteers traveled from other prefectures to offer help. Local businesses donated supplies. Engineers, architects, and medical staff volunteered their time in rotation. Stories of survival and heroism filled the airwaves, of neighbors rescuing each other from collapsed buildings, of strangers